Good morning, everyone. Charmaine here. I hope you are all well. I am back from Fredericton, and I think that I am feeling in some small way what it is like for you when you go to those intensive courses and then have to come back to work. I just spent 5 days in Fredericton. It was a great experience, but it was like a busy and intense experience, and I am exhausted. And of course, have like 5 days of work to catch up on and the work that's ahead this week. So, with that, let me just say that I am very glad to be back and ready to talk to you about what we have put together for this week. So this week our topic is social workers in the community, and it is an opportunity for us to think about how we enter communities and work with them. And the paper that's about We Don't Tell People What to Do, I hope I'm quoting that right, is the one that most directly deals with that. I will be talking in the lecture video about the paper more. So I have put into the portal I've put into the portal a lecture video, which is something that has been recycled from last year. I kind of had to do that because of my connection problems in Fredericton, but it still works. And then I also have some other materials there. There are two videos there that are people talking about their work in Indigenous communities, very different videos. One of them is a guest, like a lunch event that was done last year by one of our part-time instructors, Dr. Jim Cullen. He does work in Indigenous communities around Ontario and has been doing that. It was somehow attached to the Truth and Reconciliation work, so he's been doing that, and he's talking about that work. And then the other one is two practitioners who are working in New Zealand, who are Indigenous to New Zealand, and talking about their work with Maori, though they keep saying Maori, so maybe that's the way you're supposed to say that. So with Maori communities. And both of them are talking about how they enter the community to do work around really difficult issues. So in the New Zealand context, they're talking about the work they do with sexual violence in communities. And in the Ontario Jim Cullen video, he's talking about work that he's doing this. I think the entry point is addictions and trauma. And I am going to ask you to watch one or both of them with a lens of thinking about and discussing what they teach you that you think is useful and maybe not useful about how to enter communities. And an obvious contrast to consider is that in one case, we're talking about Indigenous people entering Indigenous communities, though not their own specific communities. And in the other case, we're talking about a non-Indigenous person who's entering Indigenous communities, obviously not his community. So that's what's going into the discussion forum this week. So there isn't a case study per se this week because I feel we're at a point in the course where it's important to start dealing with issues that are more real in some way, because in your assignment, you're going to be dealing with situations that are real. And I think the thing is, when you deal with something that has actually happened to real people in a world that you have some knowledge of, it's clearer that you don't have infinite possibilities and that there are consequences for whatever decision you make. So, for example, last week, the case with Rennell Harper, I've already said in the forum why I chose that particular videotape in that format, video clip in that format, because I wanted you to have that context. I wanted you to see her family and her community and the wider world in that situation. And I think it's a very important moment that we have access to there, because as someone said after that, as a few of you said, Rennell was set on a path, right? So at one point, a path where it looks like she wasn't quite, comfortable with being in the spotlight around these issues. And later on, she's like sort of taken on a real activist role. And when I see her doing that work, I just sort of pray that this is really what she wants to do. And certainly it seems a good way to take that situation and have something meaningful come out of it. something in which she has agency in, and something that's empowering for her. But those points all got launched by decisions that were made at the point that you saw in that video, and that's what I call like real consequences. So I want to thank you for the work that you did with that, and I want you to know that I know it was not an easy case to work with. So thank you for going in there and continuing in there even when things got sticky. So let's talk about things getting sticky. So what happened in our discussion forum last week really reminded me of a situation that happened when I was in graduate school, where I was in a class and there was a bit of at the time it felt like a bit of an explosion when somebody confronted the instructor about something. And the way that he dealt with that was to call a break, and then we never talked about it. We just pretended it never happened. And I felt like that sort of poisoned the process from then on. And it's not like I knew what would have been the perfect way to deal with that, but I just felt like we shouldn't have pretended it never happened. So finding myself now in a sort of similar situation, I do not think that I have a perfect response right now for this, but I don't want to pretend it didn't happen. And so one of the reasons I've set up a journal this week is if there are people who want to talk about this or if you want to engage with me further around it, I want you to know that space is there. I mean, you can email me too, of course, but I've created a space deliberately for that. You can also use it for other things, of course. We have assignments coming up. But something that I wanted to leave with you is the discussion forum is a place where you should be feeling free to express yourself. And part of that freedom comes from a belief that what you say will be received generously and with an open heart and with an open mind. And so the only time I would intervene in that forum is if I felt something that was happening that got in the way of people being able to participate with an open heart and an open mind and without fear. And so last week I thought I had a situation like that, and I intervened to the side because I thought that was respectful. And I had to think about whether I think it was the right thing to do. I don't think you do that kind of thing in front of the group. But what I have been thinking about is a few things. One, that as some of you said, the thing about nonverbal is that it sort of helps fill in some of these question marks around intention, and that not only may my intention in intervening have been misread, but I may have misread the situation in the first place in terms of my impression that it was putting a chill in the forum. So I see that, and I've been thinking about that. The other thing I've been thinking about actually comes from our reading this week, one of our readings this week. So in the reading, and I talk about this more in the video, they talk about how interventions from the state are seen as tools of the colonizer, right? So for Indigenous people, the education system, social service system, all of these systems have been tools of colonization. And so you show up as a social worker with, hey, I'm here to help. This is going to be seen still as being colonized, as an attempt at colonization. And although other populations may not come at that from the perspective of seeing themselves as colonized, certainly there are lots of other populations who see the interventions that we as social workers make and other systems make as tools of people who are trying to oppress and silence them. So then I have to think about that in the context of this space, right? So I'm an educator in a university that is on land that was stolen. I am a settler on Turtle Island. I am a non-Indigenous person teaching in a faculty that is about Indigenous worldviews. Teaching in a program that's about Indigenous worldviews. And I've been thinking about how whatever I may think about my intentions and how I'm communicating them, they still can be received and maybe understood as tools and actions of a colonizer and attempts to silence and attempts to marginalize and attempts to oppress. So I have been thinking about that. I'm not sure I have to think about how to then enact, I guess, a decolonizing approach. I am careful in using that word because I do think we have to be very specific about the way we use the word decolonizing. But it's given me a lot to think about, and I wanted to share that with you so that you know that that I am thinking about this and trying to find my way through it so that I can be a better instructor in this field of study and a better instructor throughout the program. Okay, so I just wanted to share that with you. I will see you online or in the journals or wherever, and I hope you guys have a good week. All right, bye.